The room was quiet except for the soft hum of cameras waiting to roll. Sandra Bullock sat across from Keanu Reeves, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Outside the studio window, the evening sun dipped low, casting golden light on the glass. She could see the way Keanu's shoulders curved forward like he was carrying more than anyone could guess. Hook. Sometimes the hardest truths hide behind the gentlest smiles. And tonight, Sandra Bullock was about to tell Keanu Reeves something that would change the way he saw his past, and maybe even his future. Keanu had always been the quiet strength on set, the man who held doors open for strangers, who carried equipment when the crew was tired, who gave up his seat on crowded buses when no one was looking. But even the strongest hearts have hidden fractures. They had been filming late nights for weeks. Between takes, Sandra noticed Keanu staring at an old photograph he kept tucked inside a worn leather notebook. Once she caught a glimpse, a boy with dark hair and a crooked grin standing beside a younger Keanu. She didn't ask then, sensing the memory was sacred, but last night, something changed. During a break, an old friend of Keanu's, an extra on set, whispered to Sandra in the hallway. The friend's voice trembled. "He still thinks his brother never forgave him." The words clung to her mind all night, heavy and unresolved. Today, Sandra decided she couldn't stay silent. She remembered a letter she had received years ago from a man who claimed to be searching for Keanu. The letter spoke of forgiveness, of missed chances, of a bond broken by pride but never by love. As cameras blinked red, she gently placed her hand over Keanu's. "Before we start," she said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." Keanu looked up, his dark eyes full of questions. His voice was barely a whisper. "Is something wrong?" Sandra hesitated. The weight of the moment pressed against her chest. "It's about your brother," she said. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Keanu's fingers tightened around hers. "My brother?" His tone was careful, like stepping onto thin ice. Sandra nodded slowly. "Years ago, someone reached out to me. He said he was your brother. He told me he was sorry. He said he missed you. He said he forgave you." The studio air grew thick, the silence louder than any sound. Keanu blinked rapidly, but a tear slipped free anyway. He looked down at the table between them, tracing invisible patterns with his fingertip. I thought he hated me," he said, his voice breaking. Memories flooded him. Late-night motorcycle rides, shared jokes only brothers understood, the day they argued and walked away without looking back. For years he carried the belief that pride had buried their love. Sandra's words dug into the deepest corner of his heart. "He didn't hate you," she said softly. "He missed you. He forgave you. And he wanted you to know." Keanu swallowed hard, but another tear followed the first. His mind spun with memories. The laughter they shared as boys, the long silence after their fight, and now this unexpected message. He stood abruptly, pacing the studio floor. The crew watched quietly, unsure whether to intervene. But Sandra stayed seated, giving him space. She understood that some storms had to pass on their own. Finally, he stopped, facing the window where the sun's last light touched the horizon. "All this time," he whispered, "I thought I lost him forever." His voice was low but full of pain. "I carried that regret into every room, every movie, every smile. I thought kindness could hide the ache." Sandra rose and walked to him. "Kindness doesn't hide the ache," she said gently, "but it heals it. And you've been healing others without even knowing it." Keanu turned to her, eyes wet, face trembling. The man known for his calm now looked fragile, human, and painfully real. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "He sent this," she said, offering it to him. Keanu took it with shaking hands. He unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was familiar, slanted, a little messy. It read, "Keanu, if you ever see this, know I'm sorry too. I forgive you. I hope you forgive me. No matter where life takes us, you are still my brother. Love, Michael." Keanu's knees almost gave way. He clutched the paper to his chest like it was life itself. "Michael." The name left his lips as a sob. For a long moment, he stood in silence, letting the truth sink in. Outside, the city lights flickered to life. Inside, A man known worldwide as a movie star was just a brother longing for forgiveness. The crew wiped their own tears quietly. Even the cameras seemed to wait, sensing the weight of the moment. Keanu turned back to Sandra, voice raw. Why didn't you tell me before?" She sighed, her own eyes glistening. "I didn't know if it was my place. But when I saw the way you looked at that picture, I realized sometimes holding back kindness hurts more than speaking up." Keanu nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for not letting this stay buried." In that instant, the walls Keanu had built around his pain cracked wide open. And through those cracks, light began to seep in. But this was only the beginning. There were still questions to be answered, old wounds to face, and a journey Keanu never expected to take. As the cameras resumed rolling, the world outside had no idea that a quiet conversation inside this small studio was about to ripple far beyond its walls. Because sometimes, the smallest truths hold the power to break and heal hearts all at once. The studio felt different the next day. Everyone on set sensed it, though no one spoke of it directly. Keanu walked in quietly, a soft smile on his lips but a storm still in his eyes. He carried the folded letter like it was the most fragile thing in the world. The world saw him as a calm and unshakable star. But beneath that surface, old memories had been stirred awake. Sandra watched him closely, sensing that what had begun yesterday was only the surface of something deeper. Keanu sat on a simple wooden bench near the back of the soundstage, staring at the letter again. A tiny tremor ran through his fingers. He whispered to himself, "Michael." After all these years, the memory of their last fight played in his head like a broken film reel. It had been over something small, something so unimportant that now it felt almost ridiculous. But pride has a way of turning small cracks into deep chasms. The sound of Sandra's footsteps broke his trance. She sat beside him, leaving a small space between them. She didn't speak at first. She just let the silence stretch, giving him the space he needed. Finally, she said softly, "I know yesterday wasn't easy." Keanu nodded without looking up. "It wasn't easy for him either," he said, his voice low. "I keep wondering what he went through all this time. Did he think I stopped loving him?" Sandra hesitated. She thought of the letter and the regret it carried. "I don't think he ever doubted you," she said gently. "Sometimes brothers fight because the love is so strong that it scares them." Keanu closed his eyes. "He was always the brave one," he whispered. "When our father left, Michael held everything together. I was the dreamer. He was the anchor." For a moment, Keanu felt like he was 16 again, sitting on the porch of their childhood home, listening to Michael tell him everything would be okay. Sandra placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe this letter isn't the end," she said. "Maybe it's a door you can still walk through." Keanu looked at her sharply. "But I don't even know where he is," he said. "The letter is old. He could be anywhere, or—" His voice faltered, and he couldn't bring himself to finish the thought. Sandra's eyes softened. "Don't give up before you try," she said. "What if he's been waiting for you to look for him?" The idea took root in Keanu's mind. It scared him, but it also gave him a spark of hope he hadn't felt in years. That night, Keanu sat in his quiet apartment surrounded by scripts and photographs. He opened an old wooden box from the back of his closet. Inside were pieces of a life he'd tucked away. A faded baseball glove they once shared, a postcard from a road trip, and a small silver watch Michael had given him on his 21st birthday. As Keanu traced his finger over the watch, memories flooded him, Michael's laughter echoing across an empty highway. Their late-night talks about dreams, their promise to never let pride win. Tears blurred his vision. He picked up the phone, staring at the screen for a long time before typing a name into a search bar. Michael Reeves. The results were overwhelming. Too many faces, too many stories. But one article caught his eye. A community outreach program in a small coastal town called Clearwater had been founded by a man named Michael Reeves. There was a photo attached. A man with familiar eyes standing beside a group of children holding hand-painted signs that read, "Hope lives here." Another clap of thunder rolled overhead. One of the children squealed and ran to Michael, who lifted the child into his arms with practiced ease. Keanu watched, his chest tight with a mix of regret and admiration. As Michael set the child down and returned to the table, Keanu spoke again. "I want to help," he said. "Whatever you're doing here, this outreach, these kids, I want to be part of it." Michael looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" "Because," Keanu said simply, "I don't want to just apologize with words. I want to show you." Michael's jaw worked as he fought back tears. Finally, he nodded slightly. Sandra, watching silently, felt her throat tighten. She could see something shifting, old walls crumbling, new bridges forming. But just as the room seemed to soften, the phone on the wall rang sharply, startling everyone. Michael stood and answered, his expression changing quickly from confusion to alarm. He covered the receiver with his hand and looked at Keanu. "There's a storm warning," he said. "A boat of volunteers bringing supplies for the kids is stuck out on the water." "They're calling for help!" Keanu's heart pounded. The storm outside was growing violent. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Michael hesitated, then looked at him with a mix of fear and trust. "Come with me," he said. "If we don't go now, they won't make it to shore." Keanu stood without hesitation. The years of distance between them suddenly felt irrelevant. Whatever anger or pain they had carried didn't matter. Not now. Sandra stepped forward. "I'm coming too," she said firmly. Michael shook his head. "It's dangerous." "So is letting someone drown," she replied. Together, the three of them rushed out into the storm, the rain lashing their faces and the wind howling like a living thing. As they reached the docks, lightning split the sky, illuminating the restless sea. A small boat bobbed desperately against the waves, its lights flickering. The cries of the stranded volunteers barely carried over the roar of the storm. Keanu's heart raced as memories of their childhood boating accident flashed in his mind. He glanced at Michael, who gripped the dock rail tightly, his knuckles white. "We can do this," Keanu said, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. Michael looked at him, eyes wide but resolute. "Together?" "Together," Keanu answered, and with that single word they leapt into the chaos, two brothers facing the storm side by side once more. The wind screamed across the dock as the waves crashed violently against the wooden posts. Rain poured down in sheets so heavy it blurred the horizon. Keanu and Michael stood shoulder to shoulder, soaked to the bone, their faces lit by flashes of lightning. The stranded boat pitched dangerously with every wave. Faint cries of volunteers carried through the storm, each one a reminder that time was running out. Sandra stood close behind them, clutching her raincoat tightly, her eyes wide with both fear and determination. Keanu turned to Michael, his hair plastered to his forehead. "We can't wait for the Coast Guard," he shouted over the roar of the storm. "By the time they get here, it might be too late," Michael nodded grimly. "The old rescue skiff is still tied up at the end of the dock," he said. "It's not much, but it might get us close enough." Sandra stepped forward. "I'll steer," she said. Michael shook his head. "No, you stay here in case someone else needs help on shore." But Sandra's jaw tightened. "You'll need all the hands you can get," she replied. "I'm not staying behind while they drown." For a brief second, Keanu and Michael exchanged glances, the kind of glance only brothers can share. It carried unspoken words. Trust her. Together, they untied the small skiff, its paint chipped and its motor coughing as Keanu pulled the cord. The engine sputtered to life, the sound barely audible over the thunder. As they pushed off into the angry sea, the skiff rocked violently. Michael took the tiller, his knuckles white with tension, while Keanu and Sandra balanced against the waves. Each swell threatened to capsize them. Another flash of lightning illuminated the distant boat. The figures aboard waved frantically. Keanu's chest tightened. "We're coming!" he shouted, though the storm likely swallowed his voice. A sudden wave slammed into the side of the skiff, drenching them and nearly throwing Sandra overboard. Keanu grabbed her arm just in time, pulling her back. She met his eyes briefly, relief and fear mingling in her gaze. Michael shouted over the wind. "This feels just like when we nearly sank Dad's boat," he said. Keanu managed a grim smile. "Except now we have more to lose. They pressed forward, muscles aching, faces stung by salt and rain. Every second was a battle. Against the sea, against the storm, against their own doubt. When they finally reached the stranded volunteers, the boat was barely holding together. Two young men and an older woman clung to the railing, their eyes wide with panic. "Grab the rope!" Michael shouted, tossing a line. One of the volunteers caught it on the second try. Keanu and Sandra pulled with all their strength, drawing the boat closer. Another wave slammed into them, throwing Keanu against the skiff's side. Pain shot through his ribs, but he gritted his teeth and kept pulling. Michael maneuvered the skiff closer, careful not to collide with the larger boat. One at a time. He yelled. The older woman climbed into the skiff first, shivering violently. Sandra wrapped an arm around her and whispered reassurances. Next came one of the young men, slipping on the wet deck but catching Keanu's hand at the last second. Just as the last volunteer, a teenage boy, prepared to jump, a massive wave hit, snapping the rope and sending the larger boat drifting away. "Jump now!" Michael shouted. The boy leapt, his body disappearing beneath the water for a terrifying second before surfacing near the skiff. Keanu dove in without hesitation, ignoring the freezing water. He grabbed the boy's arm, pulling him back toward the skiff. As they both scrambled aboard, a smaller wave lifted the skiff dangerously high, almost tipping it. Sandra clung to the side, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Michael tightened his grip on the tiller, steering them toward shore. For a tense few minutes, it felt like the storm would win. But then, through the darkness, the dock lights appeared, small beacons of hope on the turbulent sea. The skiff slammed against the dock with a jarring thud. Hands reached out from the community center, pulling them to safety. The rescued volunteers collapsed on the wet boards, trembling but alive. Keanu lay on his back for a moment, rain pelting his face. He stared up at the stormy sky, his chest heaving with exhaustion. Then he turned his head toward Michael. Their eyes met. Two brothers who had been broken apart by pride, now united by the simple act of saving lives. Michael's lips trembled as he spoke. "You didn't hesitate," he said quietly. Keanu shook his head. "I'd never let you face this alone." A small sound caught their attention. One of the rescued volunteers, the teenage boy, was crying softly, whispering thanks over and over. Sandra knelt beside him, wrapping him in a dry blanket. In that moment, the storm outside seemed to quiet just a little. The echoes of past mistakes didn't feel as loud. There was still hurt, still unfinished conversations. But there was also something new, a fragile thread of hope. Back inside the community center, the rescued volunteers huddled together, sipping warm tea. The children peeked out from corners, wide-eyed. Michael handed out blankets, his hands shaking slightly from the cold and adrenaline. Keanu stood near the window, watching the rain. Sandra approached him, her voice soft. "You were incredible out there," she said. He shook his head. "No, that we were." "All of us." Michael joined them, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he spoke. "You didn't have to risk your life tonight," he said. "But you did. For them. And for me." Keanu met his brother's gaze. "Maybe this is what we were supposed to do," he said quietly. "Maybe this storm was never just about the sea." Michael looked down, his voice breaking slightly. "I missed you, Keanu." Keanu swallowed hard. "I missed you too." They stood in silence, the sound of the storm fading outside. The children's laughter slowly returned, soft at first, then louder, filling the center with warmth. Sandra stepped back, giving the brothers space. She knew this was only the beginning. Forgiveness was not a single moment, but a journey. And tonight had only been the first step. As the power flickered back on and light filled the room, Keanu felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest felt lighter, but even as relief settled over them, the storm had left behind damage in the town, and with it came a new challenge that would test their strength again. The storm had passed, but the town of Clearwater woke to a broken dawn. Shattered branches littered the streets, power lines drooped dangerously, and the salty air smelled of wet earth and splintered wood. The sky was pale gray, streaked with faint light, as if the world itself was trying to heal. Keanu stood outside the community center, hands in his jacket pockets, staring at the damage. The storm had spared no corner. Boats were overturned on the beach, and parts of the fishing dock had disappeared completely. In the distance, he could hear the faint hum of generators struggling to restore power. Inside, Michael was speaking quietly with some of the volunteers. Sandra watched him from a distance, noting the tension in his shoulders. He was no longer the unreadable man who had opened the door yesterday. He was a brother carrying memories too heavy for one heart. Keanu entered, the wooden floor creaking under his boots. "What's the plan?" he asked gently. Michael looked up, his face lined with fatigue. "The storm hit harder than we expected. The food supplies are wet, the docks are unsafe, and the nearest road to the next town is blocked by fallen trees." Keanu nodded slowly. "Then we fix what we can." A small voice interrupted them. A little boy clutching a stuffed dolphin approached timidly. "Mr. Michael," he said, "my grandma's roof. It's gone." Michael knelt, his expression softening. "We'll help her," he said. "We'll help everyone." Keanu's gaze softened, too. He could see how much these children looked up to Michael, the same way he had once looked up to his brother. Together with Sandra and the volunteers, they began clearing debris and checking on homes. Keanu hauled broken wood and fallen branches, his hands blistering, but he didn't complain. Sandra climbed ladders to patch roofs, her hair tangled with wind but her eyes bright with purpose. Michael moved from house to house, offering quiet comfort to frightened families. As the day stretched on, the three of them became a team, working in sync, trading tired smiles, sharing water bottles and quiet words of encouragement. By late afternoon, they reached the outskirts of town, where a large oak tree had fallen across the only road out. A few locals stood around it, unsure how to move the massive trunk. Michael studied the tree, then turned to Keanu. "Remember when we moved Dad's old piano without a dolly?" Keanu smirked faintly. "Yeah, we nearly broke our backs." "Then this will be easy," Michael said. Together, with ropes and teamwork, they began shifting the trunk piece by piece. Sandra rallied the volunteers, her voice firm yet kind. The work was slow and exhausting, but the sight of the brothers lifting together, grunting, sweating, and encouraging the others, sparked something in the onlookers. They started cheering softly, a small wave of hope in a day full of ruins. As the last section of the trunk rolled aside, clearing the road, applause broke out among the townspeople. The sound echoed off the hills like a promise that recovery was possible. Keanu leaned on the trunk, breathing hard. Michael approached him, their faces inches apart. "You didn't have to come here," Michael said quietly. "But you did. You showed up." Keanu met his gaze. "Showing up is what I should have done years ago." For a brief moment, Michael's eyes shone with unshed tears. But he didn't speak. He simply clapped a hand on his brother's shoulder, a small gesture that said more than words could that evening. As the sun dipped low, the community gathered at the center for a simple meal. Candles flickered on tables, casting warm light on tired faces. Children whispered and laughed softly, their fear fading into cautious joy. Michael stood near the doorway, watching them with quiet pride. Sandra joined him, handing him a cup of tea. "They trust you," she said. "They follow you because you give them hope." Michael's voice was low. Hope isn't always easy to give. Keanu stepped beside them, holding a chipped mug of coffee. "Sometimes it's all we have," he said. For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, the weight of the day pressing down on them, but also lifting them in a strange way. They had faced the storm, saved lives, and begun mending a broken town. But just when the night seemed to settle into peace, a knock sounded at the center's back door. It was soft, hesitant, almost afraid. Michael opened it to find a man in a dark raincoat, his face shadowed. He carried a small, weather-worn box. "Are you Michael Reeves?" the man asked. Michael nodded warily. "I am." The man held out the box. "Your mother asked me to give this to you." "If the time ever felt right." Michael froze. Keanu's breath caught. The man gave a small nod and stepped back into the night without another word. Michael closed the door slowly, his fingers tightening around the box. He set it on the table, staring at it as though it might vanish if he blinked. Keanu stepped closer. "What is it?" Michael's voice was barely a whisper. Mom's handwriting is on the lid. Sandra placed a gentle hand on Michael's arm. Open it, she said softly. With trembling fingers, Michael lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon, and on top, a small photograph of the three of them, two young brothers and their mother, smiling on a sunlit porch long before life complicated everything. Michael picked up the first letter and unfolded it. The paper crackled, fragile with age. His mother's familiar handwriting spilled across the page. My boys, if you're reading this, it means the world has tested you. Please remember that storms don't last forever. Pride can build walls, but kindness builds bridges. Forgive each other before it's too late. Michael's voice broke as he read the words aloud. Keanu's eyes filled with tears. The room fell silent except for the sound of the storm-damaged town outside slowly settling into quiet. Keanu reached for his brother's hand. She knew, he said, his voice shaking. She knew we'd need this. Michael gripped his hand tightly. She never stopped believing in us. Sandra wiped a tear from her cheek. Then maybe tonight is the start of something new, she whispered. The brothers sat side by side at the table, the letters spread out before them like a map back to each other. Outside, the first stars pierced through the clouds, fragile but shining. Yet beneath the fragile peace of that moment, something lingered, an unresolved thread in their mother's letters that hinted at another truth neither brother yet understood. The night outside Clearwater was quiet now, but inside the community center, the fragile letters spread across the table carried a new storm. Keanu and Michael sat side by side, the flickering candles casting soft shadows over their faces. Sandra stayed near the window, her hands folded, watching the two brothers breathe in the weight of their mother's words. Michael reached for the next letter, his fingers trembling. He opened it carefully, as if afraid the paper might crumble. His mother's handwriting spilled out like a whisper from the past. My dearest boys, there is one more truth I never told you. Years ago, when your father left, I feared you would drift apart. I asked an old friend, Joseph, to watch over both of you in secret. He carried a small box of memories and promises. If you are reading this now, it means the moment has come. Follow the address on the last page. What you find there will remind you that love never disappears. Keanu felt his throat tighten. Michael turned the letter over and found a faded address scrawled on the back. That's just outside town, Michael said quietly. Then we go, Keanu replied. Sandra nodded, her voice soft but firm. Let's finish what your mother started. The three of them left the center under a sky clearing of clouds. The streets of Clearwater were littered with debris, but the stars above shone brighter now, like quiet witnesses to the journey ahead. They drove down a narrow road that wound through the hills until it ended at an old lighthouse, its white paint chipped and its windows dark. The sea crashed below the cliffs, steady and endless. As they stepped inside, the air smelled of salt and memories. On a small wooden table sat another weather-worn box. Michael approached slowly and opened it. Inside were photographs, their mother at the lighthouse with a younger Joseph holding baby Michael and little Keanu. There was also a single envelope addressed simply, "For my boys when you are ready." Michael opened the envelope. His mother's words were gentle but strong. My sons, you will face storms. Some outside you, some inside. You will make mistakes, and pride will try to steal the love you built together. But when the world feels cold, remember the lighthouse. It is here to guide you back, just as love will guide you back to each other. Forgive quickly, love loudly, and never let silence steal your joy. Keanu's tears blurred the words. Michael put an arm around his brother's shoulders, and for the first time in years, they leaned into each other without hesitation. She believed in us, Michael said, his voice breaking. Keanu nodded, his own voice soft. She never stopped. Sandra stood nearby, her eyes glistening. And now the two of you don't have to stop either, she said. Outside, the lighthouse lantern flickered to life, casting its beam across the dark sea. It felt like a sign, a message that even in the darkest moments, light could find its way. The next morning, Clearwater buzzed with quiet determination. Townspeople repaired docks, cleaned debris, and rebuilt what the storm had taken. Keanu and Michael worked side by side, lifting beams, carrying supplies, and sharing small smiles that grew easier with each passing hour. Sandra joined the children, teaching them to repaint the community center's walls with bright colors and hopeful words. In the afternoon, the townspeople gathered for a small ceremony to thank the volunteers. Michael stood on a makeshift stage, his voice strong but emotional. "Last night," he said, "I was reminded that storms don't just break things, they reveal what matters. This town matters. These children matter. And family matters even when we lose our way." He turned to Keanu. "I spent years thinking you'd forgotten me. But you didn't. You came back." Keanu stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "I carried the pain because I thought it was my punishment. But pain doesn't heal on its own. Love does. And today, I'm here to tell you I will never walk away again." The crowd was silent for a moment, then broke into warm applause. Some wiped tears from their cheeks. Sandra watched with a proud smile. She had seen the cracks in both men, and watched as kindness filled them again. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Michael and Keanu returned to the lighthouse. They stood by the railing, the sea stretching endless and blue. "Do you remember the promise we made here as kids?" Michael asked. Keanu nodded. "To always come back to each other." Michael's eyes glistened. "Let's make it again." They clasped hands tightly, two brothers who had weathered storms outside and within. Keanu took a deep breath. "Forgive me for the years we lost." "Forgive me too," Michael said. The lighthouse beam swept over them, a steady pulse of light on the dark water. Below, waves crashed but could not break the rocks. Behind them, Sandra watched quietly. She knew she'd witnessed something rare. Proof that even broken families can heal, that kindness can mend what pride destroys, and that love can find its way back no matter how far it strays. The three of them stood together for a long time, the sound of the ocean mixing with the whispers of memories. Somewhere deep inside, they knew their mother's words would echo for the rest of their lives. Forgive quickly. Love loudly. Never let silence steal your joy. As the stars brightened overhead, Clearwater glowed with small lights and quiet laughter. The storm had passed, but its lessons would stay. Keanu and Michael walked back toward the community center, shoulders touching, steps in sync. For the first time in years, neither of them felt alone.